السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. All praise is due to Allah, the Lord of everything in existence, and I testify that there is nothing worthy of worship except Allah. He is alone without any partners, and I testify that Muhammad is a servant and his messenger. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. We ask you, Allah, to bless the Messenger Muhammad, to elevate his mention and to raise his rank and to compliment him and to honor him, to shower him with grace along with his family and his righteous followers, as you did with Ibrahim, his family and his righteous followers in the past. Welcome to the 26th session and episode of Building the Foundation, where we're covering the life and times of the Messenger Muhammad in the Meccan period, and we are in the final section of the book speaking about things or events that led up to the migration. Since we're covering the Meccan period, the final section of the Meccan period is events that led up to the migration and the hijrah to Medina. So last time we spoke about Islam beginning to spread in this city called Yathrib, which later becomes or gets renamed as Al-Madinatul Nabawiyya, the prophetic city or the prophet city, Madinatul Nabi. And basically Islam has reached those shores. Some delegations had come to the Hajj. They heard about it. They went back and spoke to their people. And we spoke about the first pledge that they took with the messenger, which was the pledge that women would normally take, which is simply a pledge about the true faith that they should have, and also leaving off some of the ways of the days of ignorance. Today's section, we will start with a very significant event, and it is sending of Mus'ab ibn Umair to Medina. So Mus'ab ibn Umair is one of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. He was one of the early believers in Mecca. He came from a very well-off family, and when he became Muslim, during the era of persecution that we covered, his family banned him from all the privileges that he had. So usually rich people have privileges. So he used to be a person who used to smell so good because of the rich perfume or the expensive perfumes that he would wear. They would say if he would walk through a path that Mus'ab came from this area. After Islam, his family completely cut him off and they banned him from the privileges that he had. So he struggled, but again, he was one of the early believers, which granted him the ability to keep the companionship, the company of the Messenger ﷺ, to learn from him for many years in Mecca, to learn the revelation, to learn manners. We know the Prophet's role was يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. The Messenger would recite and read the signs and the verses and the revelation from his Lord to the people. He would also purify people. So it was a process of molding, a process of discipline, a process of tarbiyah. وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ, to purify them spiritually. وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ, he teaches them the book, he teaches them the law, and he teaches them the wisdom, which is the prophetic tradition. So Mus'ab got a big chunk of that. May Allah be pleased with him. Ibn Ishaq, the famous biographer of the historian and biographer, whose book basically is one of the most ancient books that we usually refer to in Sirah, he says that when the delegation from Medina left, the Messenger ﷺ sent them Mus'ab ibn Umair. And Mus'ab's full name is Mus'ab ibn Umair ibn Hashim ibn Abd Manaf ibn Abd ad-Dar ibn Qusay. So he's one of the people of Quraysh. And as we can tell, the names of his fathers and forefathers are prominent names. And the Messenger commanded him to do the following: to teach them, to read the Quran to them, and to teach them the Quran, to teach them Islam, and to give them the understanding about the religion. He used to be known as Al-Muqri'. Usually now when someone has the Quran, we call him Qari', right? Qari Hudayfa. We call him Qari'. He wasn't simply a Qari'. Although that's another word that we will cover, or we said that some of the companions were known as the Qurra. Qari and Muqri is different. Qari is someone who reads and someone who learns the Quran. Muqri is someone who is teaching another the Quran. Okay? So usually the scholars of Quran, they're called Muqri'een. You go to him and you read the Quran to him, he corrects your Quran, he gives you ijazah. Those are called the Muqri'een. Qari is a performer. He is a person who recites by himself. He's been taught by another person. So again, from the get-go, we learn that the Messenger ﷺ selected someone that was trained, disciplined, wise. He sent him with the following instructions. Read the Quran. So whatever revelation had come in Mecca, he's supposed to relay it to these people in their city. The second thing is to teach them the Quran. So reading Quran and teaching them Quran and teaching them Islam, whatever had been revealed so far, the regulations and the commands that had been revealed so far, and to give them the understanding of religion. يُفَقِّهَهُمْ فِي الدِّينِ. And we know that the Messenger ﷺ said, whoever God wishes for good for, he gives them understanding of the deen, of the religion. So this is something that is good for all of us to look into, and to learn and to benefit and to increase in knowledge. And knowledge is of different categories. There is so many things that one can learn, but there is priorities. Things that we can put into our daily lives. That's what we need to be learning. We don't necessarily need to be learning trivial things and just to amass information. That's not really positive in Islam. So the knowledge that we need to be seeking is knowledge that will bring us benefit. So it is also narrated that Mus'ab became the imam in Medina, the one who would lead people in salah, in the prayer. So we know that the prayer in Islam, you can pray individually, but when you have a community, you have the opportunity, you pray under or behind a prayer leader, an imam. There is a reason for this though, because of the context and the politics in Medina. We knew that there is two tribes there, Al-Aws and Khazraj. May Allah be pleased with all of them, but at that early stage, they still had problems. They had beef. They had competition. They were not very fond of one another. And the whole point behind them accepting Islam and eventually inviting the messenger was to bring peace between them. So Mus'ab now is from Quraysh. So he's a neutral side. So when he leads them, everyone will come to an agreement. But if we have someone from amongst them leading, they will say, how come it's not one of our tribe? And that would cause friction and would cause a problem between them. So there is a very interesting story that happens, and this is what basically we will cover today, is As'ad ibn Zurara. He was one of the early Muslims, and he's from the people of Medina. So he had met the messenger, and so he takes Mus'ab ibn Umair, and he is seeking a particular location, the house of Abdul Ashhal and the house of Bani Dhafar. So basically he takes them to these two neighborhoods to talk to the people there. Now, Sa'd ibn Mu'adh was one of the leaders of Medina. Sa'd ibn Mu'adh. So these names, I'm going to repeat them, and that's why I'll stop and pause for a little bit. Sa'd ibn Mu'adh is a maternal cousin of As'ad ibn Zurara. So As'ad, we know, As'ad now takes Mus'ab. These two are working together. A local from Medina is taking the ambassador named Mus'ab. Mus'ab actually is known as the first ambassador in Islam. Mus'ab ibn Umair is the first ambassador in Islam because the messenger sent him as an ambassador. He's also a teacher. The author, may Allah bless him, the author of our book, his kunya is Abu Mus'ab. Many of the people like to be called Abu Mus'ab. They want to name their sons Mus'ab, hoping that they would follow the example of this Mus'ab ibn Umair. So he's a great personality in our history. One of the early disciples of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who plays a very integral role, as we will see. The Messenger, when he came to Medina, Medina was already prepared. There wasn't much that he needed to do because of the efforts of Mus'ab, as we will learn. So As'ad ibn Zurara has a cousin. His name is Sa'd ibn Mu'adh. So As'ad brings Mus'ab, and they sit in a location where next to a well, and the well was called Bi'ru Maraq. Then people start coming and surrounding them. People who had already embraced Islam. All right? So they realize there is a teacher, there is a scholar. Let's go and sit with him and let's learn. People take advantage of that. Sa'd ibn Mu'adh was one of the leaders of the people of Medina, alongside with another man by the name of Usayd ibn al-Khudayr. Usayd ibn al-Khudayr. These two were the chiefs of the family of Abdul Ashhal. And again, we knew that As'ad, who took Mus'ab ibn Umair, went to the family of Abdul Ashhad. However, Sa'd ibn Mu'adh at this stage and Usayd ibn Khudayr, they were both idolaters. They were still following the religion of their people. They heard that this newcomer is in town. So Sa'd tells his friend Usayd, go to these people. They came to our homes. They are tricking our foolish people. They're tricking our fools. They're tricking the ignorant amongst us. Go to them and speak to them harshly. Admonish them. And forbid them from ever coming back to our neighborhood. They're not welcomed here. He said, if As'ad is not close to me, if I did not have a relationship with As'ad, then I would have done this. So we have Sa'd ibn Mu'adh commissioning his friend Usayd to go talk to his cousin, because he's afraid, he's got family relations that he doesn't want to cut off. He said, it's my cousin, and he is the favorite person on this planet as far as I'm concerned. He's my favorite person. He's very close to me. They have a very close relationship. So Usayd takes his spear. Again, these people carrying weapons was the norm. People were always armed. They carried their weapons with them, not to prepare for a battle, but for self-protection. So this is not a strange thing, but he carried a spear. Usually you don't go with a spear because that's a weapon of battle. You can take a sword, but a spear is something special. So again, the description is, he goes to them. When As'ad ibn Zurara sees him, he tells Mus'ab, this man is one of the leaders and the chiefs of his people. He's come to you, so be truthful to him. But the word he used, he says, فَاصْدُقِ اللَّهَ فِيهِ. So he says, basically, be sincere with God in dealing with him. So basically, treat him well. He's a chief of his people. Treat him well, be honest with him. So Mus'ab responds, he says, if he was to sit down, I would speak to him. So he comes and he starts cursing and abusing them verbally. Again, look, he's coming like a fighter with a spear, and now he's verbally abusing them. What brings you here? You're changing the minds of our weak and foolish. Get away from us. If you want to save yourselves, then get away from here. What is this? It's a threat. It's a warning. If you want to keep your lives, then stay away and get out of our neighborhood. You're not welcomed here. So now the response of Mus'ab. The local did not respond. It was Mus'ab who responded. He said, how about, he actually starts the sentence with, or, so basically either we do what you just said, or you sit down and you listen. If you're pleased with anything that we mention, you can accept it. And if you dislike anything that we mention, we will keep it away from you. We will keep away anything that you dislike. We will prevent you from anything that you dislike. So he gave him an offer. He says, if you sit, you can listen. If you like what we have to say, you can accept it. If you don't like anything, or you dislike it, or it makes you uncomfortable, then we will not make you feel uncomfortable. Again, very gentle in the way he responded. So the man responds, he says, you've given me a very fair deal. Fair and square. This is a very nice thing. Ansafta. You've done something very fair. So he said, he goes and he puts his spear on the ground. He actually, what's the word when you put something in the ground like a spear? How do you say that? In Arabic, we say رَكَزَ حَرْبَتَهُ. We know the Messenger ﷺ sometimes, he would have a short spear, and if he's in the desert, he would put it in front of him and pray behind it. What is this action called? Not the barrier. The actual action of putting the spear in the ground. Sticking it in? That simple? Do we have anything? That's it. We're going to accept that. Sticking it in. So basically, he stuck his spear in and he sat with them. So Mus'ab started telling him about Islam. Again, sharing Islam with him. Introducing Islam to him. And he started reciting some of the Quran to him. Some of the revelation. So they later on narrate what they were seeing. So now they're seeing this man who came with an angry face, came abusing them verbally, came giving them a threat and an ultimatum to leave their neighborhood. But they said, we saw Islam in his face prior to him speaking. His face started brightening up and it became easy. You know how like when you're upset, you're all frowning and your face is very, very unwelcoming. When you smile, it becomes easy. That's the way they described it. His face became easy and it started getting brighter. And this is the first thing he said. He says, I've never heard anything better than this. This is so beautiful. And then he says, what do you guys do when you want to enter into this religion? What do you do when you want to enter into this religion? And there's many lessons in this that we can learn because many people we have, they say, I want to embrace Islam, right? I want to take my shahada. So look how wise this guy is. He heard the lecture, you can say. Although it wasn't a lecture, it was a conversation. He heard revelation. It struck a chord with him and he was convinced. So he says, what do you do to embrace this faith? What do you do to enter into this religion? So Mus'ab and As'ad told him, you take a bath, and this is called a ritual bath. So it's not simply just to clean yourself, but it's a ghusl. What we know as a ghusl in our law. But they just told him, you take a bath, you bathe. The point behind that is to purify yourself and to purify your clothing as well. So you purify yourself physically and you purify the clothes that you're wearing. Then you testify the testimony of truth. What is the testimony of truth? I testify that there is nothing worthy of worship except God, and I testify that Muhammad is the messenger of God. Then you pray. They said, then you pray. So they gave him instructions on how to embrace Islam. So the man goes, he takes a bath, he cleans his clothes, and it says something interesting. Thawbayhi. He cleans or he purifies his two articles of clothing. The Arabs, what they used to wear is a lower garment called an izar and a top garment called a rida. So people had two garments that they would wear. So you can say shirt and pants, but it had nothing to do with shirt and pants. Basically, it's like two towels, just like what people wear in Hajj and Umrah. A lower towel that would cover the lower part and a top towel that would cover the top part. So he cleaned his two articles of clothing, and then he testified the testimony of truth, which is called the testimony of faith. We can also translate it as our faith statement. So when people were to ask you, what's your faith statement in Islam? So you say that there is no other God beside God, and that Muhammad is the messenger of God. Then he prays 2 rak'at. Then he says, I have people, I have men. He says, I have men behind me. If I follow you, then none of them would turn away. Oh, sorry. He says, I have one man, not men. I have one person who I left behind. if this man was to follow you, no one from his people would turn away from you. I'm going to send him to you right now. Who is he talking about? His partner, Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh. Okay? So then he takes his spear. It was stuck on the ground. He picks it up. And he goes to Sa'ad and Sa'ad's people. They were sitting down in one of their clubs, in one of their social gatherings. When Sa'ad saw him coming, he looks at the people and he's like, I swear to God, Usayd came with a different face than the one that he left with. Right? The face he left with was what? An angry face, uptight face, aggressive face. He comes back now, what? He just converted. He's all happy. He's excited. He just made his shahada, right? So he stops right by them, and Sa'ad asks him, what did you do? He says, I spoke to the two men, and I swear to God, I didn't see anything wrong with them. They were cool. لم أرى بهما بأسا. They were cool. They were all right. No problems. But I tried to stop them from what they were doing. So they said, we will do what you like. Okay? He said, I told them, I forbade them from preaching, and they said, we will do what you like. But then he changes the conversation. He says, but I heard that the family of Haritha, they're going out to As'ad ibn Zurara to kill him. Who is As'ad ibn Zurara? That's the partner of Mus'ab, right? And he's also who? The cousin of Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh, a very beloved cousin. He's like, when they knew that he was your cousin, they wanted to disrespect you. So Sa'ad gets up angrily. He forgets the story of Islam and the story of why did this guy change faces. And he's afraid because he's worried his cousin will be killed for himself, for his cause, basically. Because they were trying to get revenge from Sa'ad, and they're going to kill his own cousin. So he takes the spear from his friend's hand and he runs with it. Then he says, he's like, man, you didn't do anything. He takes the spear. He's like, you didn't even do anything. Then he goes to them, but he sees them sitting and chilling, just talking away, right? Because Mus'ab here is teaching the people. So he knew exactly what happened. He knew that Usayd, all he wanted him to do is to listen to them. That was a trick, basically. Usayd was tricking his friend. So again, he does the same procedure that we heard before. He stands and he starts abusing them verbally. Then he tells As'ad ibn Zurara, his own cousin. He says, Abu Umama, that's his name, his kunya. He says, I swear to God, if it wasn't the connection and the family relations between me and you, then I would have thrown the spear at you. Are you bringing to our neighborhood things that we dislike and hate? You're bringing things to our neighborhood that we dislike and hate. And then As'ad said to Mus'ab, he says, this man is the master and the chief of his people. If he follows you, none of his people, not even one individual, would not accept your message. So then Mus'ab tells him, how about you sit down and listen? If you're pleased with what we have to say and you like it, you can accept it. And if you dislike it, if it makes you feel uncomfortable, then we will keep away anything that will make you feel uncomfortable. So Sa'ad says the same word again, ansafta. That's a fair deal. He sticks his spear and he sits down. So what does Mus'ab do again? He shares Islam with him. He introduces it and presents it to him. And he recites some portions of the Quran to him. They say again, we swear that we saw Islam in his face before he even spoke. It brightened up and it became easy. He said, what do you guys do when you submit? What do you guys do when you become Muslim and you enter into this religion? They said, you wash yourself, you take a bath, purifying yourself. You purify your clothes, and then you testify the testimony of truth, and then you pray 2 raka'at, 2 cycles of prayer. He gets up, he takes a bath, he cleans his clothes, he testifies the testimony of faith, and then he prays 2 raka'at. Then he takes his spear and he goes back to his people. And he has Usayd ibn Khudayr with him, his partner. When his people saw him, they said, "We swear to God that he came back to you, Sa'd came back to you with a different face than the one he went with." When he stopped, he says, "O Bani Abd al-Ashhal, O my people," he's calling his own family, "O my neighborhood, what do you say about me? What's my status amongst you?" They said, "You are our leader. You are the best amongst us. You are the one with the best intellect, and you are the one with the cleanest heart." He said, "Well, I refuse to speak to any of your men and women. I make it forbidden unto myself, except if you believe in God and His Messenger. I make speaking to your men and women forbidden unto me until you accept and believe in God and His Messenger." So the narrator says, by that evening, there was not a single man or woman in the family of Abd al-Ashhal in that whole neighborhood except that they became Muslim. As'ad and Mus'ab go back to As'ad ibn Zurara. They went there and they saw him, and they started calling people to Islam, and there was no house from the houses of the Ansar, the aides, the supporters, except that there was men and women who became Muslim in there. So this is the story of Mus'ab. Very briefly, it's actually just one event, but we see that Mus'ab was a good selection, and we're going to extract some of the lessons here, inshallah, for the duration of our class. Mus'ab is someone who's trained by the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was taught and he was selected. The Prophet was very careful on who he selects as an ambassador. You know, when you have a country now, they don't just send any random person. You go and apply for an ambassador job and they say, "Yeah, sure, you can represent us." They choose someone very well. You got to go to school, you have to have recommendations, you have to be endorsed, you have to go through training. And this is for simple political things in modern day nation states. The Messenger ﷺ was selecting an ambassador to represent Islam. So the role of an ambassador to Islam, we hear that some Islamic organizations, they say we have ambassadors of Islam, right? The ones who call others to Islam. Others may say, well, these are just missionary workers, or these are just preachers. The point is, you have to be very selective in who you choose. These people have to be trained, they have to be taught and taught well, they have to be endorsed, and they have to be molded in a certain fashion. Not everyone is fit for this type of job. And this is not about being, discriminating against anyone. There is no discrimination in Islam, but not everyone is a doctor. Just because you feel like you want to be a doctor, we can't just tell you, "Here, go ahead, go to the operation theater and perform surgery." You have to go through a long process. And many people find out that they're not fit for that job. So everything in life, there is specializations, and you have to respect that. It has nothing to do with discrimination. If you have what it takes, then you may do it. So when it comes to presenting Islam, we have to be selective in who we choose to represent our religion, to speak on its behalf, who the spokespeople are for Islam. And we are doing this following the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, following his example. He had many companions in Mecca, but he was very selective in choosing Mus'ab. Okay? And we gave a little brief background of who Mus'ab was. Someone pampered growing up, someone who was you can say, very rich, but he goes from riches to rags. Usually you hear people saying, going from rags to riches. He did the opposite thing when he became Muslim. But that cleansed him, that purified him. Spiritually, he was on high grounds. Although people can say, well, look what this guy did. What did he do? You convert to Islam and you just lost all your material benefits. You lost all your privileges. And that's what we have today. People who convert to Islam, this is what people tell them. Man, you were fine before Islam. Look what happened to you. You're a bum. You're homeless. You can't get a job. You're this, you're that, right? Well, what's more important? Is it the pleasure of God or is it the pleasure of man? We're going to read some of the lessons, and I have some others on my mind as well that I would like to share. One of the principles in da'wah, which is to invite and to call others to Islam, is to be very caring about your followers. Da'wah is not simply about giving people shahada and let them roam freely. Congratulations, takbir, see you later. That's not da'wah. That's not proper. This is completely against the way of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We should not let these people go, and we should basically follow up with them in order to make sure that the da'wah spreads and grows organically. And this is exactly what the Messenger did when he sent Mus'ab. Why do we say that? So we knew from the last lesson that Islam now had reached Yathrib, had reached Medina. People are learning about it. People are interested in it. The Messenger could have just said, okay, let them be. What did he do? He sent them a teacher. He sent them an ambassador. The second thing is to be very keen and diligent in choosing the right teacher, the right caller, the right ambassador, because this is one of the main points behind making this mission a success. Choosing the right person for the right job is one of the reasons to gain success. Mus'ab, may Allah be pleased with him, had several characteristics that he was special with. So he had the Quran memorized so far, whatever was revealed at that stage, because we know the Quran was revealed over a period of 23 years, so it had not been completed. He was not hafiz, right? But he had memorized whatever had been revealed up until that stage. He also knew Islam very well, and he can present it. He was intelligent, he was smart, and he knew how to behave. There is something called husnul tasarruf. It means to deal properly in any given time and any given situation. It's not robotic. So some people are just told, hey, whatever you do, everybody that comes in, you just treat them the same way. You just have like one protocol, right? That's like a military person, a soldier. Any commanding officer comes, give him what is that called? A salute, right? Mus'ab was not like that. He knew how to handle himself depending on the situation. He also knew how to present the product that he has. What's the product that Mus'ab has? Islam. He knew how to present his product in a very quality fashion. And he also had the ability to convince people. So he had information, he had the Quran. And he knew Islam so far, revelation, the commands. But he was very intelligent, he was smart, and he knew how to behave in different situations. In any given situation, he was excellent in presenting the product that he has and showcasing it, and also he had a great ability to convince others. This is very similar to having a salesman. It requires a special type of personality to be a salesman. For example, if you're shy, you can't be a salesman, because people come to you and you're like, and they're like, yeah, what do you want? So a salesman is a person who goes out of his way, right? He calls people. My family told me they were at the store, and this guy, they were in the next aisle, and he's got something to present. So he calls them, he's like, who wants a little of this, right? And he's doing this to everyone, not just my family, because he's a salesperson. A salesperson knows how to get to the people. And a da'iyah is very similar to a salesperson. Whether you're on the street, whether you're in a speech, you're trying to present and showcase whatever you have, the product that you represent, and then you're trying to convince others to accept it as well. Now, of course, the problem with salesperson is sometimes they're tricky and they lie and they are manipulative. So we have to be careful of those things. In Islam, we don't have something called the ends justify the means. The ends is to get someone to convert, according to some people. So whatever I'm going to do to get them to convert, I'll do it. That's not the ends or the means. The ends is to present the message, to simply show people what Islam is. That's the end. The result is up to God. And then the means is that you do it according to the way shown to us by the messenger. May Allah bless him and grant him peace. The third lesson is that it's very important to invite and to call and to take special care of the elite and the chiefs of society. And this was one of the ways of the messengers and the prophets. Why so? Because if they are rectified, if they are upright, if they get fixed, the rest of society gets fixed. I don't know if you guys are aware, but until today, tribal societies, if you're able to convince the tribal chief of something, the whole tribe is in agreement. If he converts, and we hear about this, whether it's Islamic missionary work or Christian missionary work, a chief in Africa or in Asia converts, and his whole tribe, thousands of people, automatically convert. So influencing the influential people in society is one of the methods of the prophets. We know this. Ibrahim and Musa and Isa, they all went to al-mala', the elites amongst their people. Usually the elites also reject the message because they're afraid of all their status and all their wealth and all these things being taken away from them. But still, the messengers they were keen in sharing the message with these individuals. Number 4, it is important to utilize the traditions, the cultures of people when it comes to spreading the message and spreading any type of good. This is what As'ad ibn Zurara did. Because when he went to his cousin, Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, his point was, I don't want your honor to be disrespected, right? When he told him, what was that case? As'ad ibn Zurara went to his cousin and told him that I don't want your honor to be disrespected. So that's part of their cultural traditions. And the Muslim here utilized that for his own advantage. So if you know that people do a certain thing and it gets a message across, then you utilize it. You don't bring something strange to them. You utilize what's culturally normal and what's acceptable to them. Again, this goes with the principle that we have to always repeat, as long as it does not contradict one of the teachings of Islam. So for example, just because somebody's culture, there's something effective in their culture, this doesn't mean we just jump onto it. We have to see whether it goes in accordance with Islam or not. Number 5, knowing the reality, the condition, circumstances of the people prior to inviting them and teaching them anything is a must. And also utilizing the best ways of communication. We always say this, the way you were to speak to younger people is not the same as the way you speak to adults. In education, if you're trying to be a teacher, being a general teacher, there is one method to do it. And then teaching adults is called adult education. You go through a different program altogether. And then when you're in academics and what's called higher education, there is a different method as well. And when you are giving a sermon, a khutbah, you behave in a certain way. When you're sitting in a classroom environment with your students, you say things in a certain way. When you're out in the street, you communicate in a certain way. I'm just giving these examples, but the point is, whenever a person has a mission and they have something to invite to, then they have to utilize the best method of communication in any given time, in any given place, and also utilizing the best method possible. Now, how do we learn this? As'ad ibn Zurara, may Allah be pleased with him, would give a complete report about the individual that Mus'ab is about to speak to. Before the guy comes, As'ad tells him, this is a chief in his people. This is a leader. He's one of the elites. If you were to influence him, then you can influence others behind him. He says, be truthful with him, be honest with, again, each individual, he was giving Mus'ab a certain report. And that's very important for us to utilize as well. So Mus'ab can use the proper method. And this is taken also from the teaching of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which I'm going to stop on or pause on for a minute. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam also sent another companion. His first name starts with a meme. Mus'ab. What's the other one that was sent to Yemen? Mu'adh ibn Jabal. Now he sent him to Yemen, and he says, "O Mu'adh, you're going to people who are people of the scripture. You're going to a people who are known as people of the scripture." So Jews and Christians are the people of the scripture. And we know that Yemen had both people. It had both categories of those people. When the scholars explain that narration, why was that so important? The messenger is giving him a report. He's telling him to be ready. Although you're an Arab and your people are idolaters, that's what you're familiar with. But I want you to familiarize yourself with these people of the scripture. Because there is a different way between talking to an idolater and talking to someone who believes in God already. Right? The language used is going to be different. The things you focus on are going to be different. And that's why the messenger told him in priorities, the gradual process of teaching and inviting and da'wah. He says, the first thing that you should tell them about is to worship God alone with no partners. Let that be the first thing you call them to. Don't tell them about the Islamic financial system and the Islamic political system and the Islamic family social system. Tell them about God and how to worship Him. If they accept that, move on to the next level and tell them that God, because if they accept it, they're like, okay, we're ready to worship God alone. If they accept that, then tell them God has made obligation unto them prayer 5 times a day in 24 hours, in the day and the night. If they are to accept that, then tell them about the poor due, and is it a tax that is taken from the rich in society and returned back to the poor in society. Again, he says, stay away from their favorite riches. Stay away from the things that they cherish the most. So take from their wealth, but don't be taking the things that they care about the most. That's not the proper approach. So the Messenger ﷺ again gave a report to Mu'adh before sending him. Mus'ab here is the teacher, and As'ad ibn Zurara is giving him a report. He says, this is Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh. This is Usayd ibn Khudayr, right? And then he gives them a report. This is important. Some people are shy and they don't talk. And you may have to be in a situation where you are counseling people. You're helping people through a challenge. Now, you may not be qualified to speak to them, but they trust you. So they tell you all the details in their lives. You know, you've been friends with them for a long time. They talk to you very well. Now, you can benefit them without speaking about something that you're not an expert on. Do not try to counsel them because you're not an expert counselor. You can actually be giving them wrong advice. But what you can do is go to an expert, a counselor, someone in the community who has that field of expertise, and then you relay the message. And better yet, take them with you and tell them, I know a doctor. I know someone who can take care of you. And take them with you. Now, naturally, people are going to sit and they're not going to open their mouth. They're not going to talk about their private business in front of this stranger, especially if it's an imam or a sheikh or something like that, or someone of prominence in the community. But you could be doing the talking for them. You could be their spokesperson. So you give a full report. When you give a full report, the counselor is able to give them the right solutions. Because if they're not sharing any information, he'll be telling them, he won't be given the right information. So again, this is very important in da'wah, is when someone is coming, and this is a problem. So I told you about the open mosque day. So we had guests coming, and sometimes Muslims were bringing them over. But they just brought them, and they just let them roam freely. They didn't tell us anything about them. The proper approach is to say, even ahead of time, to call the people responsible, or to come before bringing the guest and to say, I'm bringing such and such. This is their background. Don't give their social security number. That's not the point. But the person is educated. The person maybe had challenges in their life. The person just came out of divorce. This child never had a father figure in their life. And so you give the person a background. But if you don't, then the default thing is just to talk about general things. But when I know something about you, I'm going to cater my speech towards you. So when I speak to people who have the Quran memorized, what do you guys notice? I want you to go to work, so I will mention an ayah from the Quran and you say the rest. MashaAllah, you're all huffaz. And I have them competing with one another. Everyone is there with me, waking up. If I was talking about something else that they're not an expert in, then I wouldn't get anywhere with them in their conversation. So utilizing proper speech with the different people that you come across. Number 6 is to be kind and gentle in dealing with people and calling them to Islam, because that's one of the best way to open up their hearts, to open up their minds, to accept what you have. And where do we learn that? From what Mus'ab said. Mus'ab said, do you mind sitting? Or you can sit. That's how he started. أو تجلس. Why don't you sit? And we learned that before as well, right? The Messenger ﷺ had told, and I had mistranslated it, and then I fixed the translation. He says, do you mind sitting? Kind of like seeking them to, like it's almost like telling them, will you honor me with your presence? Saying something sweet, working on that heart, stroking that ego to bring the person in. Because you have something important to share. So it's not like, all right, let me tell you what this Islam thing's all about. You like it, take it. You don't, you can leave it. Nobody wants to be talked to like that. It's like, why did you even invite me? What kind of open mosque is that? You know, you're not interested. You're doing a job. It's very robotic. But someone who's sincere, as we said, the Messenger saw an opportunity in every individual. Whether it was the Jewish boy servant that was on his deathbed, that's not going to bring any benefit to the community, right? He went to him. Whether it was his uncle Abu Talib on his deathbed, he's not going to help the Muslims in any way, shape, or form. The only thing the Messenger said is, say these words. I can use them to advocate for you on your behalf with God, right? So the intention was to give people, help them towards salvation and to open up the doors of God's mercy to them. Number 7, forbearance, also being, not being fast. Ana, what's al-ana? Al-hilm wal-ana. You know those two characteristics? Hilm is to be forbearing. Somebody abuses you and you are forbearing. Someone wrongs you and you overlook that. Ana, al-anatu, ta marbuta. You don't make hasty decisions. Okay? They say ta'anna. When, for example, you start talking quickly, I should tell you, instead of slow down, ta'anna. Speak slowly. Slow down. So being forbearing and slowing down, being under control, basically under composure. You're not out of control. You're not all over the place. That's one of the best ways of sharing the message and relaying the mission properly to people. How do we know that? Mus'ab could have said, man, this guy is coming with a spear, watch out, let's run away, right? The guy is coming with a fighting face. But Mus'ab was all chill. Okay, let's see him. What does he got, right? If he sits down, we can talk to him. Under control. Unfortunately, with us, we see something like trouble, it's like, oh no, let's hide. Let's jump out the windows. No, just take it easy. Let them come. Deal with them properly. Be able to handle yourself properly. Number 8, being fair with the people you're inviting or the people that you're teaching. Also respecting their intelligence and giving them options. It's going to allow them to respect you, to honor you, and to possibly look into what you have to present. Where do we get that from? Mus'ab tells him, if you're pleased with something that I present, then you can accept it. If it makes you feel uncomfortable, if you dislike it, then we will stop saying anything that causes you discomfort. That's the method of Mus'ab. May Allah be pleased with him. Number 9, you saw that the Arabs, although prior to Islam, they had good characteristics. So they had chivalry, they had manhood, they had justice, and this was part of their characteristics. And that's why when Mus'ab gave him the options, he said, Ansafta. You gave me a fair deal. And he accepted it, right? Although he was coming with aggression. Number 10, Islam brings life to people's hearts and their minds, and it immediately changes and alters its followers to workers, to missionary people, people of a mission. From the first moment they enter into Islam. Usayd and Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, the two people we discussed today, as soon as they became Muslim, they went back to their people and they influenced them. And then Islam had spread all over the city. Now, the question is to all of us who are born Muslim, possibly, or have been Muslim all our lives. We've lived many years in Islam. How much have we shared the message of Islam? And how much concern do we have for this deen in relaying it to all of humanity? Even the concern sometimes is missing. And sometimes we don't even like people to tell us, it's important for us to have concern, to have this hem for sharing the message with other people. Number 11, and this is the final lesson that we can extract, inshallah. Or actually, there's many, but the last one that I will mention today is that these honorable individuals, the companions and disciples of Rasulullah, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when you see them, you realize, why did Allah choose them? Why did Allah select them to keep the company of His Messenger? When you read their life stories, you realize there was something special about these people. That's why Allah selected them. They were the cleanest people in their hearts. They had the deepest of knowledge. They were the most truthful, and they did not go out of their way. They were natural. They were completely natural and organic. May Allah be pleased with all of them, and may Allah bless the individual who trained them, molded them, purified them, taught them to give victory to Islam and to the Muslims, which is Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. So although today we spoke about Mus'ab, As'ad, Usayd, and Sa'd, may Allah be pleased with all of them, we didn't mention the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam much. But this one ambassador and these leaders in Medina were influential in spreading Islam all over the city in preparation for the Prophet's coming, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we ask Allah to bless the Messenger Muhammad and to bless his companions and to bless his followers up until the last day. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidun Majid. Allahumma barik ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidun Majid. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. Give us the good of this life, O Allah. Give us the best of the next life and protect us from the fire. اللهم إنا نسألك رضاك والجنة ونعوذ بك من سخطك ومن النار. We ask you for your pleasure and for paradise, and we seek protection in you from your displeasure and from the fire. اللهم أعنا على ذكرك وشكرك وحسن عبادتك. Help us, O our Lord, to remember you at all times and all places, to be grateful to you for all the blessings that you've given us, and to worship you in the best of ways. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. All praise is due to Allah, the Lord of everything in existence. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.